Hey, welcome back to the Group Project Podcast. This is episode number 59, and we're calling it I'll Sleep When I'm Dead. So it's actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about a blog post that I shared last week about sleeping, just all kinds of things I've learned about sleeping, how important it is. As educators, as leaders, for anybody who's pursuing personal growth, just sleep is just so important. I'm beginning to realize more and more as I research, as I read, as I learn from others, as I live my life. So I wanted to share just some of the key takeaways I've gotten um, during my research these last few years on sleep, and I'm going to connect it. I'm first of all, I'm going to share like why it's important, maybe some misconceptions about sleep, how much you need, and some barriers to sleep. And then I'm going to tie it back into, because this is an educational leadership podcast, I'm going to tie it back to what sleep needs to need, or what sleep means to kids, and also productivity in the workplace. So, if you haven't joined us before, this is the Group Project Podcast where we focus on leadership, education, and personal growth. So if you like those three areas, if you're interested in those three areas, or maybe just two of them, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you've checked out the episodes here. Most of our episodes, I'm interviewing somebody and just kind of picking their brains, trying to learn from them, trying to come away with some key takeaways from their leadership and their path to education. But sometimes I do these solo episodes where I just kind of, usually I'm talking about one of the recent blog posts that I've written. All my blogs are on drjaredsmith.com, and they've got a lot of traction here recently. A lot of personal growth ideas that I've shared, and I share them on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and been getting a lot of feedback, a lot of comments, a lot of questions. So I figured let's just dig into this idea about sleep. And let me just share with you, just like I said, some of the key takeaways I've had about why sleep is important. And then, like I said, towards the end, I really want to tie it back into what it means for schools and what it means for productivity. So you're going to get some of the info up front, and at the end, I'm going to kind of tie it back into education. So again, if you haven't done it yet, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and on Spotify. Make sure on iTunes you give us you rate a 5 star, I hope, and then maybe give a review, which I love getting those. So we've got a couple 5 star reviews. I think we've had a couple the last couple weeks. So please keep those coming. So the episode is called "I'll Sleep When I'm Dead," and the blog, if you want to look it up, it's also the same name, "I'll Sleep When I'm Dead." And really, my research has come from a few different books, but I would say, now some people have indicated they like hearing the book recommendations. They want to know, okay, hey, I love what you're sharing. I want to go and read more. I want to go and learn more. Here's, from my estimates and from my research, the top two books that you can find on sleep are these two. Number one is called Sleep Smarter by Sean Stevenson. He also has a book that I recently reviewed called Eat Smarter, which is also dynamic. It's awesome. Check out both of his books, Sleep Smarter and Eat Smarter. But specifically in this episode, we will talk about Sleep Smarter. Also, book number two is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. It's another outstanding book out there about sleep. I did a lot of research kind of leading into purchasing those books. I encourage you to check those out. If you are forcing my hand, which book is better, Sleep Smarter or Why We Sleep? I'm going to lean a little bit towards Why We Sleep. I just felt like I came away with a few more takeaways than I did from Sleep Smarter, but both, you can't go wrong. It's probably, we spend a lot of time of our life sleeping. It is a very wise investment for you to learn a little bit more about sleep. So I would encourage you to spend I don't know, $40 or so to pick up those two books on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever you get your books from. So in schools, there's like this badge of honor about who sleeps the least, right? And the couple quotes I wrote down that I know I've probably used these before and I've heard them in teachers' lounges. It's I was up until 1 a.m. grading homework. And then it's this great debate on who stayed up longer. Oh, yeah, I was up until 2 a.m. lesson planning. And, the people who say those things, and I've been guilty of it, and probably you have been too. There's almost this like, I want you to feel bad for me, but I also want to prove that I stayed up the longest and I was working the hardest. And, I used to buy into that. I used to think, the longer I stay up, the longer I worked on whatever it is. And it could be, if you're a teacher, it's lesson planning or um, grading work, or as an administrator, right? It's like I was at the football game until 11 p.m. and then I woke up the next day at 6 p.m. for this. There's like this like badge of honor about who stays up later. And I'm here to tell you, like, that's great. Like, there's probably going to be times when you need to, like, you're going to be very limited on the sleep that you get. However, if you do that consistently, you are really limiting some of the skills and some of the abilities you have as a person. And let me just read some of these benefits to sleep. And again, these come from those two books and a few other books that I've read, but mostly those two books. So there's so many benefits to sleep. What I've got written down here is enhances memory, boosts creativity, lowers food cravings. So it means it helps with your dieting, reduces the risk for cancer, reduces the risk for heart attack, for stroke, wards off colds and the flu, increases happiness, lowers anxiety. Not to mention, sleep also, it's proven to increase attractiveness. So I don't know who, of all those things, there's a lot of important ones there, but the increased attractiveness, that's a pretty nice perk of getting some beauty rest, right? So they're endless. But as you probably imagined, there's a lot of people who neglect sleep. 60% of Americans report not getting enough sleep. And I think, gosh, I know later in the show, I'm going to talk about teachers also not getting enough sleep. Here's what I've got here. Sleep patterns. Okay. The average amount of sleep for teachers is about 6.5 hours of sleep. But about 43 almost 50% of teachers report sleeping less than 6 hours a night. And in a job as grueling and demanding as education is, you've got to be firing on all cylinders. You've got to have that energy, and you've got to have all those other things that we just talked about, the benefits. So clearly, there's a lot of educators who are not getting enough sleep. So, I know a lot of people who say, well, I only sleep 4 hours and I get along just fine on 4 hours of sleep, or I get along just fine on 3 hours of sleep. And a lot of people have tricked their minds into thinking they can perform well with just a minimal amount of sleep. And I don't have the specific number in front of me, but there's a very, very, very small percentage of people, like 1% of people, who can actually live on 4 hours of sleep and actually perform at very high levels. So they might be sleeping just 3 hours a night, 4 hours a night, and say I'm fine. And they might just be so used to it that they feel like that's normal operating level, when really they're operating at a very subnormal state of mind. So the quote I wrote in my blog was, millions of people unwittingly spend years of their life in suboptimal state of psychological and physiological functioning, never maximizing their potential due to their blind persistence in sleeping too little. 60 years of scientific research prevent me from accepting anyone who tells me that he or she can get by on just 4 or 5 hours of sleep each night. I take that back. That wasn't actually in my blog post. It was actually from Matthew Walker's Why We Sleep. So the expert Matthew Walker, who I've actually tried to get on the show, but he's like very busy and a little too maybe hard to get. But he says this. He says that people who say I can get away with 4 or 5 hours sleep, they are consistently in the suboptimal state. And like I said, there is 1 in 100 of 1% of the people out there who can do this. But 99% of everybody else who says that they can do this, it's really not happening. So if you can't tell, I'm a little passionate about telling people like you need sleep, you need rest, you need to operate at these high levels, you need to sleep. So why are we not sleeping? I get it. As educators, we are burnout. We've got a lot going on. We work long days. We've got, education leaders, we work nights, we've got night meetings, we've got to be there early in the morning before kids get there. We're busy and we've got families and kids to care for. But like I mentioned in the blog post, um, a lot of times we'll say we're busy, but then we put down the kids at, I don't know, 8 o'clock. And again, I've said this numerous times. I don't have kids. So I'll be the first to admit that I'm going off of anecdotal evidence from hearing other people about kids. But you put down the kids at 8 or 8:30, right? So you could go to bed at 8:30 or 9. But a lot of people will say, well, I need some time to myself, or I need some time with my wife, or husband, which is totally fine. However, when people start to dig in what they do from 8:30 to 10:30 or 11, they're watching television, they're browsing social media, they're watching sports, right? It's the NCAA tournament. It's been very tempting to stay up late and watch those late games. There was a late game last night. Online shopping, it can be addicting to get, but online shopping, I'm as bad as anyone trying to find that great deal where you're going from website to website, trying to find the best deal on a pair of shoes or headphones. And before you know it, you've spent an hour and a half, 2 hours for what? Maybe saving $5, $10. Um, so there's a lot of in gaming. A lot of people play games. A lot of older guys are gamers, right? Again, nothing wrong with these things, but when you compare those hobbies or those things you're doing versus getting good sleep and good rest and getting those 7.5, 8 hours at night, you're choosing those other things as opposed to sleeping. So when people say they're too busy or they've got too many things going on, that prevent them from sleeping, I encourage you to kind of peel back really, how are you spending that time? Is it really you've got important things going on, or are there some of those leisure type things that you're maybe spending an hour or two at night not sleeping and only getting 6 hours of sleep because of those leisure type activities? So you're probably wondering, like, how much sleep should adults get at night? Well, most of what I've seen, what these books say, is that you really should aim for about 7.5 hours, 8 hours. Now, keep in mind, that's actual sleep hours. That's not like go in to bed. Usually takes you some time to fall asleep. So when you say like, I go to bed at 10 and get up at 5, which would be 7 hours, are you really falling asleep at 10? And are you really sleeping that whole time? Because most people can't fall asleep right on time. And most people wake up in the middle of the night and it takes some time to get back to bed. So when we're talking about 7 hours of sleep, we're talking about 7 actual hours of sleep. Now, I've never owned one of those Apple watches or one of those watches that keeps track of your time, but I've talked to a lot of people who keeps track of the time sleeping. And they're like amazed by like how, they think they've slept for 8 hours or 7.5 hours, but really when they look at the clock, they look at the watch, it says closer to 6. So even if you're in bed from 10 to 5, which would be 7 hours, how many hours of sleep are you really getting? But beyond that 7 hours, 7.5 hours, 8 hours, which is ideal for adults, what these two books talk about and what a lot of the most recent research talks about is not number of hours. It's more number of sleep cycles. Okay, so I'm going to read what a sleep cycle is here real quick. Sleep cycles last approximately 90 minutes and repeat throughout the night. Each cycle consists of 65 minutes of normal um, non REM, which is rapid eye movement sleep, 20 minutes of REM sleep, and then 5 minutes of non REM sleep. I'm not going to get into the REM sleep. I could sit here for another 30 minutes and probably try to explain that. I won't be very good at it. But what the research is saying is that each night you go through these cycles, these 90-minute cycles. And I guess so if it's 90 minutes, the ideal for 7.5 hours, 8 hours of sleep would be to go through 5 sleep cycles per night. Okay. So what both Matthew Walker and Sean Stevenson say is you're going to shoot for 35 sleep cycles per week. So 35 divided by 7 nights is 5 sleep cycles per night. So why sleep cycles? Okay. So there's forever you've heard 7, 8 hours of sleep per night, but now they're saying look more at sleep cycles and look more instead of one night, 8 hours, look over the course of 1 week and try to get 35 sleep cycles. And in my blog, I say that there's 2 really good reasons for doing this. And here's those 2 reasons why you'd want to focus on sleep cycles, those having 5 sleep cycles per night on average, or 35 over the course of the week, as opposed for feeling pressure to get 7 to 8 hours every night. And here's those 2 reasons. First, counting sleep cycles provides more flexibility with sleep schedules. So for educational leaders, this is perfect. There's going to be some nights that are super busy for you or they're super long. It could be your Friday nights. It could be your Tuesday nights. It doesn't matter, but there's some nights that are long for you. If you have a nighttime commitment, that will limit your sleep to say 4 sleep cycles. So 4 sleep cycles would be 6 hours. You can actually catch up on sleep and not feel bad about it by adding a cycle later on in the week. So you probably already do this. So say your Friday, you've got a football game and you got to be up early Saturday morning. So you only get 6 hours of sleep, right? And you only get 4 sleep cycles. Well, the studies are saying is that you could make up for that time the next night. And since you only got 4 sleep cycles the night before, you're supposed to get 5 each night. You can actually get 6 on Saturday night or Sunday night and kind of make up for that lost sleep, which kind of makes sense, right? So here's the second reason why you want to look at sleep cycles. I don't know if you're a light sleeper. I would consider myself like a medium sleeper, meaning like I sleep pretty well for the most part, but I kind of go in streaks. But if you're a light sleeper or if you have insomnia, you probably have a bad habit of looking at the clock when you can't sleep, right? And say maybe it's 2 a.m. and you get up at 6 a.m. and you're looking at the clock and you can't stop thinking like, I've only got 4 hours left before I got to wake up. And it's this anxiety of not being able to sleep. And then you look at the clock and you add more to that anxiety that really makes it a struggle if you are looking at just hours per night. But if you look more at an average over the course of 7 days, it's less stress. Like, you can have one bad night and get away with it. Maybe you can even have 2 bad nights and get away with it, as long as you know, like, okay, I can still make up for this sleep later in the week. So it's just a different way of thinking about things. Now, there's also some evidence in these books about if you sneak in a power nap, then you actually can make up a sleep cycle. So even if you only get like a 20 or 30-minute power nap in, that can actually make up for losing a full 90 minutes of rest the night before or a couple days before. So when you think about sleep cycles, these 90-minute sleep cycles where you're shooting for 5 each night and you're shooting for 35 over the course of the week, it just takes a little bit of the stress and the anxiety away from having to get that 7 or 8 hours of sleep every night that is really the mental block for a lot of people who have sleeping issues. So beyond that, in the blog, I talk about 5 barriers to sleep. So what are those 5? There's 5 common barriers to people not being able to sleep very well. What are those barriers? And here's number 1. Number 1 is looking at screens before bed. Okay, so looking at artificial light, laptop screens, smartphones, tablets, all of those things right before bed are not good. It takes your brain a long time to slow down and to get in a sleep mode when you're watching your laptop or your cell phone or your tablet. But what the research says is 50% of Americans sleep with their phone next to their bed. Think about it. Do you sleep does your phone lay next to your bed when you sleep? Mine doesn't. Okay. Mine's is a little ways away. Which I know that's like probably looked down upon for educational leaders, because there's this feeling that we have to respond to emergencies at all times. I could get into this for quite some time. I'm up at 4:30 every morning, and I'm seeing my clock or my my phone when I get up, and I'm one of the first people up in our districts, and I'm seeing if something happened, and I'm on it right away. Also, in the middle of the night, I will go and check my phone just to make sure that there's no emergencies that have happened and something I've got to call on. But quite honestly, we've trained our staff on our communication protocols, about how to handle certain situations. And when you've got those structures in place, really, you shouldn't, as educational leaders, feel like you have to have that phone right next to your side. Okay. And again, I could probably talk about that for another 30 minutes. And maybe I'll come back to that in a future episode, but I do not have mine right next to my bed. I've got to actually go up and grab it. So I don't want to be my cell phone. I don't want to be this addicting piece where I'm going to go look at it and look at social media and look at it right before bed, or wake up and look at email in the middle of the night, or first thing in the morning. So screens before bed are not good. Okay. And I didn't mention this. 90% of Americans use an electronic device 60 minutes or less before bed. 90%. Okay, of Americans use a device. So if you have trouble falling asleep right away at night, a lot of it has to do with using those devices. Again, 2 experts in these books, many experts have said the same thing: is looking at those devices, looking through that blue light, that artificial light, evening light, really hampers your progress for trying to fall asleep on time. Number 2, do you drink caffeine at night? I'm guilty of this. There's not a whole lot of people, I would say, that will drink caffeine after 5 p.m., 6 p.m. Sometimes I crave either coffee or like an energy drink after dinner. Don't ask me why. I'm kind of addicted to it, and this could be part of my issue for not sleeping well at night at times, but caffeine has an average half-life of 7 hours. So let's say you have a cup of coffee at 7:30 p.m., which I've been known to do. This means by 1:30 a.m., 7 hours later, 50% of that caffeine is still in my system. It's still circulating throughout my body. So again, think about when you have that last sip of caffeine. Maybe it's 4 p.m. Okay. So if you're an afternoon drinker of caffeine, and it could be pop, I don't know, some of those don't have as much caffeine as coffee or as an energy drink. But say it's at 4 o'clock and that half-life of that caffeine is 7 hours. You still have half of that caffeine in your system at 11 p.m. So keep that in mind. Number 3, struggling to sleep. Here's number 3. Do you keep your bedroom warm? Now, cooler is better. If you want to fall asleep, cooler is better. Most people, I'm guilty of it, choose a controlled house temp or bedroom temperature between 70, 71, 72 degrees. However, the ideal bedroom temperature for falling asleep quickly is 65 degrees, which I think is cold. But if you're having trouble falling asleep, there's endless research that says have it cooler in your room. Like I said, 65 degrees is that ideal temperature. Number four, if you're struggling to sleep, number four, consider this tossing and turning. A lot of people I know who struggle to sleep, they toss and turn. And so when you wake up in the middle of the night, maybe you've slept for 3 hours, two sleep cycles, right? Maybe you fell asleep at 10, you woke up at 1. But then at 1 o'clock, you are tossing and turning, and you're on your left side, and then you're on your back, and then you're on your right side. And before you know it, 45 minutes has passed, maybe an hour has passed. What the research says is if you find yourself awake for more than 20 minutes, which I do all the time, consider getting out of bed and doing something quiet and relaxing, such as reading or journaling until the urge to sleep returns. So here's what I do. A lot of times when I can't sleep at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., I've got so many ideas floating around in my head, um, whether it's about work or something I need to do the next day or relationships or something I just need to follow up on. That though having those thoughts floating around my head will keep it so I can't go to sleep. What I have been trying to do is get up, go down to the kitchen, grab a note card or my journal and just write out those ideas that I have or those things I need to do so I can get those out of my mind, get them written down and get them out of my system so I can go back to bed. Sometimes, and I wouldn't recommend this too often, but sometimes I have been known to email, and I know that's like a faux pas at times. But again, I've already pre-communicated this with my team, so they know what to expect out of me. But if there's an idea I have and I just want to get it out, I will go and send that quick email or a reminder or something that just a great idea that came to my mind. I will go and send that quick email. No, I know email is probably not good. It's you're looking at that artificial light, but sometimes it's that idea I just got to get written down and get it, get it captured somewhere. And once it's out of my system, then I can relax and go back to bed. So if you're tossing and turning for more than 20 minutes, get up, go downstairs, go into a different room, and do something quiet, such as writing, journaling, writing down your ideas, reading, whatever it might be. And struggling to sleep, number five, the fifth barrier, a lot of people have old mattresses. There's a lot of nice mattresses out there. There's so many different styles. There's a lot of different online options now that are like direct from company to your house. But a lot of people don't think about their mattress. They don't put much thought into it. I said this earlier. You're going to spend a third of your life in bed, and yet we put no research into sleeping and we put no research into our mattress. So really do your due diligence, spend a few extra dollars on a good mattress and get something that matches your body type and your sleep style. Again, I encourage you to go and kind of research that on your own. So, what about kids? Okay, so this is an educational leadership podcast. So, of course, let's talk about sleep and kids just for a few minutes, and let's talk about school and sleep. First and foremost, kids need more sleep than adults. Currently, most high school and middle school students average around 7 hours of sleep. While that doesn't sound so bad, consider that high school students need around 9 hours of sleep to get those full benefits. And again, so I said most high school and most middle school students average around 7 hours of sleep. So high school students need about 9 hours of sleep. Middle school students need about 10 hours of sleep. Now, let me ask you, if you've got high school kids and you've got middle school kids, are your kids getting that many hours of sleep? They might only be getting 7 or 6. And that you might be saying, oh, they're performing at a high level. Again, I'm going to go back to that mentality earlier that it's likely most people are so used to getting that amount of sleep that they feel like they're operating at a high level. but really they're operating at a substandard level that they're just used to. Now, here's probably one of my favorite parts of the blog that I found. We often call teenagers lazy because they like to stay up late and sleep in. However, due to the normal biological processes in their bodies, asking a teenager to go to bed at 10 p.m. is like asking adults to go to sleep at 7:30 p.m. Also, asking a teenager to wake up at 7 a.m. is like asking an adult to wake up at 4:30 a.m. So when we talk to kids and we say, "Hey, how come you don't go to bed at 10 and wake up at 7 like a normal adult?" To their biological processes, it might seem normal. 10 p.m., 7 a.m., perfect. 9 hours of sleep. You're in time for school. You're ready to roll. However, according to research and according to teenagers' biological processes, a 10 p.m. adult bedtime is the same to, a 10 p.m. teenager bedtime is like asking an adult to go to bed at 7:30 p.m. And again, a 7 a.m. wake up time is like asking an adult to wake up at 4:30 a.m. Now, I wake up at 4:30 a.m., but that's on the early side. There are a lot of adults wake up closer to 6 a.m. And if you were to ask them like, "Hey, you need to start waking up at 4:30 a.m., not 6," how would they respond? I'm guessing not too good, right? So keep in mind that teenagers' biological processes are much different. Now, what are school districts doing? About 80% of US high schools begin before 8:15 a.m. However, I'm not going to go too deep into start times, but the research says that high school students especially should be going later in the morning. Now, I know that's very difficult for many of us to change. And it's probably not going to be an overnight fix, and it's probably not going to be well liked by the public. However, schools that have shifted to later start times, and some have done this, have reported higher academic achievement and a reduction in morning traffic accidents by students. So you might not be able to change that start time, but start thinking about, what does your morning look like for kids? Because a lot of them, when they get there, are not quite awake when they arrive at 8:15 or 7:30 or 7:45. So are there some slight changes you can make in that schedule that is more student friendly? I need a quick drink real quick. Hold on one sec. Speaking of traffic accidents, we know many teenagers who love to pull off all-nighters. Either they're studying or they're hanging out with friends. And this goes for teenagers and adults. Being awake for 20 hours straight makes the average driver perform as poorly as someone who is legally drunk. In fact, accidents caused by drowsy driving exceed those accidents caused by alcohol and drugs combined. So do the math. Okay, 20 hours. There's some times when you're awake for 20. So maybe you couldn't sleep and you got up at 3 a.m. right? And maybe that is a Friday morning. You couldn't sleep. You were excited for something. You wake up at 3 a.m. And then that night you stay up until 11 p.m., right? So that would be 20 hours later. And if you're up till 11 p.m. and you haven't had a sip of alcohol, but yet you drive home and you've had 20 hours without rest, your impairment is actually the same level as someone who is legally drunk. So, and again, accidents caused by drowsy driving exceed those accidents caused by alcohol-related accidents and drug-related accidents combined. So keep that in mind. Finally, there appears to be a link between sleep deficiency and ADHD. Children with ADHD are irritable, distractible, and unfocused during the day. symptoms that are nearly identical to those caused by a lack of sleep. Based on recent surveys, it is estimated that more than 50% of children with an ADHD diagnosis don't actually have ADHD. They actually have a sleep disorder. So, before assuming a child, and a lot of times we are quick to say, oh, that child has ADHD, schools may want to investigate sleeping habits before they automatically say that kid's got ADHD. I thought that was very fascinating that a lot of times we are saying, oh, they're irritable. They can't stay focused. They are distracted. That's a lot of times we just jump the gun and say ADHD, but really it could be a lack of sleep. It could be they're up all night on their on their tablet or on their cell phone, or they're gaming all night. They're playing Fortnite or whatever it is these kids play these days, right? So you may want to look into that, because that's just a real fascinating thing. Last but not least, as educational leaders, how is productivity? How is that impacting our workplace? Well, take a listen to this. A lack of sleep is consider what it's doing to school district efficiency. Teachers slap. Okay, I'm going to mention those sleep patterns from earlier. The average amount of sleep teachers get each night is 6.7 hours, which isn't too bad, right? Because we said we should be shooting for about 7.5 hours. However, about 43%, so I'm going to round that, it's pretty close to 50, around half of teachers report sleeping less than 6 hours a night. Now, I talk to so many educators who are probably in that 5 to 6 hour range, especially, just when you think about parents with kids, or if they've just had a kid, like how difficult that is for those staff to get those hours of sleep. So why does this matter? It turns out insufficient sleep costs organizations about $2,000 per year per employee in lost productivity. Okay, so $2,000 per employee per year. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but take $2,000 times the number of employees in your school district. So, and do the math, okay? And that's the amount of productivity your district has lost. So our district, which is kind of on the small side, only has 250 employees. But if 250 employees times $2,000 per employee is $500,000 lost each year in lost productivity. Okay, so that's a smaller district. What about a larger district? So what I did was I looked up the 100th largest school district in the United States. Does anybody have any guesses what that district is? It's the Charleston County in South Carolina. It's the Charleston County School District, which has 6,500 employees. Again, this is the 100th largest school district in the country. So it's pretty big. It's not the biggest, but it's pretty big. Assuming their employees experience average sleep deficiencies, a staggering $13 million in productivity is lost each year due to inadequate sleep. So we've talked about a lot of things here. We talked about the importance of sleep. We've talked about some books you can read. We've talked about this badge of honor in our school district. I know you've heard these conversations. I only got 5 hours of sleep last night. Oh yeah, I only got 4 hours of sleep. And it's this debate in our teachers' lounges and in our admin meetings about who got the least amount of sleep. And really, part of us is like, we're oh, woe is me. But really it's like, it's almost like this badge of honor. So what I'm telling you is start promoting, start educating your staff about the importance of sleep. Tell them it's not okay to only get 4 hours of sleep. And if they tell you they can operate on just 4 hours of sleep and be fine and function at a high level, I'm here to tell you it's probably not the case. They're probably thinking they can, but really they're probably not performing at their high levels. So keep in mind those statistics about our students. keep in mind the idea about sleep cycles and averaging out your sleep cycles across the week. I also did another blog. I'm not going to get into it today for the sake of time, about napping, about how important and how it could be a huge piece of your productivity puzzle if you work in some quick naps, some quick power naps, and how you can really come back after those naps and get some deep work done. So again, I encourage you to go and read that blog post as well. I can't remember what it's called, but there's a blog post about napping. So again, I hope you enjoyed that show. I try to just, like I said, combine some leadership ideas with education, with personal growth. Again, sleep is just something that I'm trying to shoot every night for about 8 hours, 8.5 hours of sleep. My mom texted me before the show. She wants to call me tonight at 9:30 or 9:15, and I'm gonna have to tell her when I'm done here, I'm sorry, mom. I go to bed about 8:15, 8:30 each night. I know it's sad, but I do get up about 4:30. So there's your 8 hours, right? So but again, don't feel bad if it, one last thing I'm going to leave you with is don't feel bad about protecting your sleep. I tell our administrators all the time, we've got an athletic director, and if you can see me on the video, I'm pointing behind me. Our high school is right behind me. And I've told our high school leadership, especially, I know you're going to have late nights. There's going to be some basketball games that will keep you here until 11 p.m. I value your sleep, meaning I don't care as long as you work those 8 hours plus each day. I want you to shift around that schedule. You don't got to be back in school at 7 a.m. the next morning. Work it out with your leadership team and come in an hour late or come in an hour and a half later so you can get that sleep. Again, don't feel bad about protecting that sleep so you can get that 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep every night. So I leave you with that. Again, I hope you like this show. This is episode 59. I'll sleep when I'm dead. I've got a guest this Friday night. This will be my first Friday recording, but it just worked out for our schedules. Todd Rose, best-selling author. He actually is in the education department at Harvard University, is going to join us. So I cannot wait for that show with Todd this Friday night. So I will be dropping that probably sometime this weekend. So again, if you like the show, rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes and on Spotify, and spread the word. Let people know about this show. And hey, we will see you next time on the Group Project Podcast.